The auction block stood in the merciless afternoon sun of Sheridan, Wyoming, a spectacle that made even the hardened miners and gamblers shift uncomfortably in the dusty street. And Catherine Vale knew this moment would determine whether he remained the man his father raised him to be, or became just another cruel opportunist in this harsh land of 1879. Catherine stood at the edge of the crowd, his weathered Stetson pulled low against the glare, watching men bid on another human being as if she were livestock. The practice was illegal, of course, but out here in Wyoming territory, laws meant little when powerful men wanted something. The woman on the platform wore a faded cotton dress that had once been blue, her dark hair hanging in tangled waves past her shoulders. She kept her eyes downcast, her thin frame trembling despite the heat. "What am I bid for this fine specimen?" The auctioneer called out, a portly man named Henderson who ran the local trading post. "She can cook, clean, and she will not talk back, I guarantee it." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Catherine felt his jaw tighten. He had come to town for supplies, not to witness this degradation. He should leave, tend to his ranch, forget he ever saw this. But something about the woman's posture, the quiet dignity she maintained despite her circumstances, kept his boots planted firmly in the dirt. $50, called out a voice. Catherine recognized Pete Matheson, a prospector known for his violent temper and rough treatment of anyone weaker than himself. $50, do I hear 60? Henderson's voice boomed. Catherine studied the woman more carefully. She could not have been more than 22 or 23 years old, with delicate features that spoke of refinement rather than frontier hardship. How had she ended up here on this block, being sold like cattle? 60. Another voice shouted. This time it was Samuel Cross, who owned a saloon on the edge of town where the girls who worked there rarely smiled and often sported bruises. The woman's shoulders hunched forward slightly, and Catherine saw her lips move, though no sound reached his ears. She was saying something, but what? $75, Matheson countered, his eyes gleaming with possessive intent. Catherine had built his ranch from nothing over the past 5 years. He had 200 acres of good grazing land, a sturdy house his own hands had constructed, and enough cattle to provide a comfortable living. He lived alone, preferring solitude to the company of the rough men who populated most of Sheridan. His father had taught him to respect all people, regardless of their station, before dying of pneumonia 3 winters back. His mother had passed when he was just a boy, leaving him with only vague memories of her gentle voice and warm embrace. 75, do I hear 80? Henderson's gaze swept the crowd. The woman looked up then, just for a moment, and Catherine saw her eyes. They were the color of storm clouds, gray and deep, filled with a desperate plea that struck him like a physical blow. Her lips moved again, forming words he could not hear, and he realized with a start what Henderson had meant. She could not speak, or could only do so in a whisper too quiet for this raucous crowd to hear. $100, Catherine heard himself say, his voice cutting through the noise like a knife. The crowd turned to look at him. He was known in town but kept to himself mostly, conducting his business and leaving without socializing. He had a reputation as an honest man, which made him somewhat of an oddity. 100 from the rancher, Henderson called out, clearly pleased with the rising price. Do I hear 125? 125, Matheson snarled, glaring at Catherine with undisguised hostility. Catherine stepped forward through the crowd until he stood directly in front of the platform. He could see the woman more clearly now, see the purple shadows beneath her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and fear. Her hands were clasped together so tightly her knuckles had gone white. $200, Catherine said firmly, never taking his eyes from her face. Cash money, right now. A murmur ran through the crowd. $200 was a fortune, more than most of these men saw in 6 months. Matheson's face flushed an ugly red, but he stepped back, knowing he could not match such a sum. Cross shook his head and turned away, already losing interest. $200, Henderson repeated, his voice rising with excitement. Going once, going twice, sold to Catherine Vale for $200. Catherine reached into his jacket and withdrew the leather pouch where he kept his savings. He had been planning to buy more cattle, expand his herd, but that seemed trivial now. He counted out the bills and coins, placing them in Henderson's greedy palm. "Pleasure doing business," Henderson said with an oily smile. "She is all yours." Name is Zara Nelson, or so the men who brought her in claimed. Came from a wagon train that got hit by bandits up north. She was the only survivor they found. Catherine's stomach turned at how casually Henderson spoke of such tragedy. He climbed the steps to the platform, approaching Zara slowly so as not to frighten her further. Up close, he could see the small cuts and bruises on her arms, the way she flinched slightly as he drew near. "Miss Nelson," he said softly, removing his hat. "My name is Catherine Vale. I have a ranch about 5 miles from here. I will not hurt you, you have my word on that. Will you come with me?" She looked at him directly for the first time, those gray eyes searching his face as if trying to determine whether he spoke the truth. Her lips parted, and he leaned closer to hear. "Thank you," she whispered, the words so faint they were barely more than breath. But he heard them, and something in his chest tightened at the vulnerability in that tiny voice. "Can you ride?" he asked. She nodded. "Then let us leave this place," Catherine said, offering his arm. She hesitated only a moment before placing her small hand on his sleeve, her touch light as a bird. The crowd parted as they descended from the platform. Catherine was acutely aware of the stares, the whispers that followed them. He led Zara to where his horse, a sturdy bay gelding named Rusty, stood tied to a hitching post. Next to Rusty, he kept a pack mule loaded with the few supplies he had already purchased. "I only have the one horse right now," Catherine said. "Would you be comfortable riding with me?" "It is not too far." Zara nodded again. He noticed she kept her eyes down, as if afraid to look at the people around them. Catherine untied Rusty and mounted, then extended his hand to help Zara up. She was lighter than he expected, and she settled behind him on the horse with a grace that surprised him. When she wrapped her arms around his waist to steady herself, he felt the trembling that still ran through her body. "Hold tight," he said gently, and urged Rusty into a walk. They rode through Sheridan's main street, past the saloons and shops, the blacksmith and the church. Catherine kept Rusty at an easy pace, conscious of his passenger's fragility. Once they left the town behind, the landscape opened up into rolling grassland dotted with sagebrush and wildflowers. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still crowned with snow even in July. Catherine wanted to say something to ease the tension he felt radiating from Zara, but he could not find the right words. What did you say to someone who had just been sold like property? How did you reassure someone who had lost everything? Instead, he focused on the ride, guiding Rusty along the familiar trail to his ranch. The sun blazed overhead, and he was grateful when they crossed into the shade of a small grove of cottonwood trees that lined a creek running through his property. "Almost there," he said over his shoulder. The ranch house came into view a few minutes later. It was not grand, but Catherine took pride in what he had built. The structure was solid timber with a stone chimney, a covered porch across the front, and glass windows that had cost him dearly, but were worth every penny for the light they let in. Behind the house stood a barn, a chicken coop, and several corrals where his cattle grazed peacefully. Catherine dismounted and helped Zara down. She stood uncertainly, looking at the house as if it might be a mirage that would disappear if she blinked. "This is home," Catherine said simply. "Let me show you inside." He led her up the porch steps and opened the door. The interior was clean but sparse, furnished with the basics he had built himself. A table and chairs in the main room, which served as both kitchen and dining area. A stone fireplace, shelves holding his few books and cooking supplies, and 2 doors leading to bedrooms. Everything was neat and orderly, the habit of a man who lived alone and took care of his own space. "You can have the bedroom on the right," Catherine said, gesturing. "It was meant to be a guest room, though I have never had a guest before. There is a bed, a dresser, and a washstand. I apologize that it is not much." Zara walked to the doorway of the bedroom and peered inside. When she turned back to him, tears were streaming silently down her face. Catherine felt panic rise in his chest. "Miss Nelson, what is wrong? If the room does not suit, you can have mine. I will sleep out here." She shook her head quickly and her lips moved. He stepped closer, bending down to hear. "It is perfect," she whispered. I thought I would end up in a crib in a saloon or worse. This is more than I dreamed possible." The anguish in her barely audible words hit Catherine like a punch. "That will never happen," he said fiercely. "You are safe here, Miss Nelson. I bought your contract, yes, but I do not believe one person can own another. You are free. You can leave whenever you wish, though I hope you will stay at least until you are recovered and have a plan for where you want to go." She stared at him as if he had spoken a foreign language. "Free, free," he confirmed. "I will not touch you, will not force you to do anything against your will. I have this ranch, and it keeps me busy from dawn to dusk. I could use help with cooking and such if you are willing, but if you are not, that is your choice. You may stay as long as you need." Fresh tears spilled over, and Zara covered her face with her hands. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs. Catherine stood awkwardly, wanting to comfort her but not knowing how, not wanting to overstep when she had already endured so much. Finally, she lowered her hands and looked at him with red-rimmed eyes. "Why?" she whispered. "Why what? Why did you save me?" Catherine considered the question. "Because it was the right thing to do," he said slowly. "Because I looked at you and saw someone who needed help, and I was in a position to give it. Because I could not stand the thought of what would have happened to you otherwise." She studied his face for a long moment, and he met her gaze steadily, letting her see the truth in his words. Whatever she saw there seemed to satisfy her, because she gave a small nod. "I will earn my keep," she whispered. "I can cook and clean, and so I will work hard." "I have no doubt of that," Catherine said. "But for now you should rest. When did you last eat?" She looked away, and he had his answer. "Let me prepare something," he said. "You should wash up first if you like. There is a pump outside, or I can heat water for a bath if you prefer." "A bath," she whispered, and there was such longing in her voice that Catherine immediately moved to action. He hauled buckets of water from the pump and heated them over the fire, then dragged his old tin tub into her room and filled it. He found clean towels and a bar of the good soap he saved for special occasions, setting them within reach. "Take all the time you need," he said. "I will be outside tending to Rusty and the animals. Just call if you need anything." He paused, then added, "Though I suppose calling would be difficult. I will check on you in an hour or so, make sure you are all right." "Thank you," Zara whispered, and this time there was a hint of warmth in those gray eyes. Catherine left her to her privacy and went outside. The afternoon sun was beginning to soften, casting golden light across the ranch. He unsaddled Rusty and brushed him down, checking his hooves and making sure he had fresh water and feed. The familiar routine settled Catherine's mind, which was racing with thoughts of the woman now under his roof. What had he done? He had just spent $200 and gained a house guest who would completely upend his quiet existence. He knew nothing about Zara Nelson, except that she had survived something terrible and lost her voice in the process. Or perhaps she had always been unable to speak properly. Either way, she was now his responsibility, and he found himself strangely glad of it. After an hour, Catherine returned to the house with an armload of firewood. He knocked gently on the bedroom door. "Miss Nelson, are you decent?" The door opened a crack and Zara peeked out. She had washed her hair and changed into a nightgown that must have been provided with the room's furnishings, something he had bought years ago thinking his mother might visit before he learned of her death. The nightgown was too large for Zara's slim frame, but she looked infinitely better than she had on the auction block. Her face was scrubbed clean, revealing smooth skin and delicate features. Her dark hair hung in damp waves down her back. "I am going to make supper," Catherine said. "Will you join me, or would you prefer to eat in your room?" She opened the door wider and stepped out, indicating she would join him. Catherine nodded and moved to the kitchen area, pulling out his supplies. He was no great cook, but he could manage the basics. He sliced bacon and set it to frying, then mixed up cornbread batter and put it in his cast-iron skillet. He had canned beans from last summer's garden and fresh water from the pump. Zara watched him work for a few minutes, then moved closer. She pointed to the knife and the vegetables he had sitting on the counter. "Would you like to help?" Catherine asked. She nodded and picked up a potato, peeling it with quick, efficient movements. Together they prepared the meal in companionable silence. Catherine found himself acutely aware of her presence. The way she moved gracefully despite her exhaustion, the faint scent of soap that clung to her. When the food was ready, they sat at the table. Catherine said a brief grace, something his father had always insisted upon, then served them both. Zara ate slowly at first, then with increasing hunger, as if she had forgotten what it was like to have a full meal. "There is plenty," Catherine assured her. "Eat your fill." She did, and he was glad to see some color return to her cheeks. When they finished, she immediately stood and began clearing the dishes. Catherine helped, and they washed and dried together, falling into an easy rhythm. As the evening shadows lengthened, Catherine realized he had not thought beyond the immediate moment. What would their days look like? What would they talk about when she could only whisper? How would this arrangement actually work? Zara seemed to sense his uncertainty. She took a piece of paper from the small stack Catherine kept for ranch records and a pencil. She wrote in clear, flowing script, "I will try not to be a burden. Thank you for your kindness." "You are not a burden," Catherine said firmly, "and you do not need to thank me. We will figure this out together." She wrote again, "Can you hear me when I whisper?" "If I am close enough, yes," Catherine replied. "We will make it work." She smiled then, just a small curve of her lips, but it transformed her face. Catherine felt his breath catch. She was beautiful, he realized, truly beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with physical appearance and everything to do with the strength he saw in her. The evening passed quietly. Catherine sat in his chair by the fire, reading from one of his books while Zara examined the shelves, occasionally pulling down a volume to look through. As darkness fell, he lit the lamps and banked the fire. "I rise early," he told her. "Before dawn, usually, to tend the animals and start the day's work. You do not need to get up with me. Rest as much as you need." "I am an early riser, too," she whispered, having moved close enough for him to hear. "Then we will have breakfast together," Catherine said. "Good night, Miss Nelson." "Good night," she whispered. "And please call me Zara." "Only if you call me Catherine," he replied. She nodded and retreated to her room, closing the door softly. Catherine stood alone in the main room, listening to the night sounds outside. Crickets chirped, and somewhere in the distance, A coyote howled. He felt the weight of what he had done settling over him, but it was not an unpleasant weight. For the first time in years, his house did not feel empty. He went to his own room and lay down on his bed, but sleep was long in coming. His mind kept returning to Zara, to the fear in her eyes on the auction block and the fragile hope he had seen when he told her she was free. He had meant what he said. She could leave whenever she wanted. But a part of him, a part he was not quite ready to examine too closely, hoped she would choose to stay. The next morning, Catherine woke to the sound of someone moving in the kitchen. He dressed quickly and emerged to find Zara already up, the fire going and coffee brewing. She had found his stores and was mixing batter for pancakes. "You did not need to do this," Catherine said, though he was touched by the gesture. She turned and whispered, "I want to help." They ate together as the sun rose, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Catherine told her about the ranch, the cattle that needed checking, the fences that needed mending, the garden that was struggling in the summer heat. She listened intently, occasionally asking quiet questions he had to lean close to hear. After breakfast, Catherine showed her around the property. The chickens needed feeding, which she took over immediately, scattering grain with a gentle hand that had the birds flocking to her. The garden did need work, and she knelt in the dirt without hesitation, pulling weeds and checking plants with the ease of someone who had done such work before. "You know farming," Catherine observed, crouching beside her. "My family had a farm," she whispered, "in Missouri, before." She trailed off, and Catherine did not push. Whatever had happened to bring her to that auction block was not something she needed to relive right now. They worked through the morning, and Catherine found himself constantly aware of her presence. She was efficient and capable, moving through tasks with quiet determination. When the heat grew too intense, he insisted she rest in the shade while he continued with the heavier work, but he could see she chafed at being idle. Over the next few days, they fell into a routine. Catherine handled the livestock and the heavy labor, while Zara took over the house and garden. She was an excellent cook, transforming his basic ingredients into meals that reminded him of his childhood. She kept the house spotless, and somehow made the space feel more like a home than it ever had before. In the evenings, they would sit together, sometimes raiding, sometimes just existing in comfortable silence. Catherine found himself looking forward to these evenings more than he wanted to admit. He would find excuses to sit near her, close enough to hear when she whispered comments about her book or asked questions about his life. He learned that she was 23, had grown up on a farm with 2 older brothers and a younger sister. Her family had decided to head west to Oregon, seeking better opportunities. "We were 3 weeks into the journey," she whispered one night, her voice barely audible even in the quiet house. "They came at night, bandits. They killed the men first then." She stopped, her hands trembling. "I hid under a wagon. I watched them kill my family. My father, my brothers, my mother, my little sister, all of them." Catherine felt rage kindle in his chest at the thought of such violence. "I am so sorry," he said inadequately. "When they finally left, I was the only one alive," Zara continued. "I tried to scream, to cry out, but no sound would come. The fear had stolen my voice. I can only whisper now, and only sometimes even that." "How did you end up in Sheridan?" "I wandered for days. Eventually, some men found me. They brought me to town, but instead of helping, they sold me to Henderson, who organized the auction. They said I was goods salvaged from the train, that they had a right to sell me to recoup their trouble." "That is despicable," Catherine said, his hands clenching into fists. "Those men should be in jail." "But they are not," Zara whispered. "That is the way of things out here, might makes right." "Not on my land," Catherine said firmly. "Here you are safe. Here you have a home for as long as you want it." She looked at him with those storm-gray eyes, and something passed between them, a connection that went beyond words. "Thank you," she whispered. As the weeks passed, Catherine began to realize his feelings for Zara were growing beyond simple protectiveness or compassion. He found himself watching her as she worked in the garden, admiring the way the sun caught in her dark hair. He looked forward to their quiet dinners, to the sound of her whispered voice reading aloud from books in the evening. He noticed small details, the way she hummed silently while cooking, her lips moving though no sound emerged, the graceful movements of her hands as she sewed or worked. He tried to tell himself it was only natural to appreciate a companion after years of solitude, but he knew it was more than that. He was falling in love with Zara Nelson, and the realization both thrilled and terrified him. What if she did not feel the same? What if she saw him only as her rescuer, a protector, nothing more? Worse, what if she felt obligated to him because he had bought her freedom? The thought made him sick. He wanted her to stay, yes, but only if she truly wanted to, not because she felt she owed him. One evening in late August, Catherine was mending a bridle on the porch when Zara came out and sat beside him. The sun was setting, casting the land in golden light. She had been with him for 6 weeks now, and the shadows under her eyes had faded. She had gained weight, filling out the dresses she had made for herself from fabric he had bought in town. She looked healthy, vibrant even, and so beautiful it made his chest ache. "Catherine," she whispered, and he turned to her, noting that she always spoke his name with a softness that did something strange to his heart. "I need to tell you something." His stomach dropped. This was it. She was leaving. She had recovered her strength and would move on, perhaps to Oregon as her family had planned, or back east to start over. He forced himself to smile. "What is it?" "I am happy here," she whispered. "Happier than I have been since before everything. You have given me not just safety but a life. I do not want to leave." Relief flooded through him. "You are welcome to stay as long as you like." "That is the thing," she said, and he saw color rise in her cheeks. "I do not want to stay as just a housekeeper or a guest. I want more than that." Catherine's heart began to pound. "What do you want, Zara?" She looked directly at him, and he saw vulnerability and hope and fear all mixed in her expression. "I want to be your wife," she whispered, "if you will have me. I know I bring nothing to the marriage, no dowry, no family, not even a full voice. But I can offer you my heart, my loyalty, my love. Because I do love you, Catherine. I think I started falling in love with you when you climbed those stairs and spoke to me with such gentleness when everyone else looked at me like I was worthless." For a moment, Catherine could not speak, could not breathe. Then he was setting down the bridle and taking her hands in his. "You bring everything to the marriage," he said intensely. "Your strength, your kindness, your courage. You survived things that would have broken most people. You took the pieces of your life and built something new. I would be honored to be your husband, Zara, more than honored. Because I love you too. I have loved you for weeks now, but I was afraid to say anything, afraid you might feel obligated because of how we met." "Never," she whispered fiercely. "You gave me my freedom. What I offer you now, I offer freely with my whole heart." Catherine pulled her close, and she came willingly into his arms. He held her gently, as if she were something precious and fragile, though he knew now she was anything but fragile. She was strong as tempered steel, soft as she was resilient. "Will you marry me, Zara Nelson?" he asked. "Yes," she whispered against his chest. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Sheridan. Catherine had wanted to give Zara time to plan and prepare, to have the wedding she deserved, but she insisted she wanted something simple and quick. The minister, a kind man named Reverend Thomas, performed the ceremony with his wife as witness. Zara wore a dress of sky-blue cotton that she had sewn herself, and Catherine wore his best suit, which he had not put on since his father's funeral. When the minister asked if she took Catherine as her husband, Zara's whispered, "I do," was so quiet that only Catherine heard it clearly. But it did not matter. He heard it, and he knew she meant it with every fiber of her being. "I do," Catherine said when it was his turn, his voice strong and sure. "You may kiss your bride," Reverend Thomas said with a smile. Catherine cupped Zara's face in his hands and kissed her gently, reverently, pouring all his love and promise of protection into that single moment. When they parted, there were tears on her cheeks, but she was smiling. They returned to the ranch as husband and wife, and Catherine carried her over the threshold as tradition demanded. That night, they came together with tenderness and care, Catherine constantly checking to make sure Zara was comfortable, that she wanted to continue. She whispered her love for him in his ear, soft words that bound his heart to hers more surely than any vows. The months that followed were the happiest of Catherine's life. He and Zara worked side by side, building their home and their future together. They expanded the garden, and Zara proved to have a gift for growing things. Vegetables flourished under her care, and she started a small herb garden near the kitchen door. She befriended the chickens, naming each one, and they followed her around like devoted pets. Catherine increased his herd with the remainder of his savings, and Zara insisted on learning to help with the cattle. She proved a natural horsewoman, and together they would ride out to check the stock, racing across the grassland with the wind in their hair. In those moments, Catherine would look at his wife and feel such overwhelming joy that it almost frightened him. Zara's voice remained a whisper, though Catherine sometimes thought it grew slightly stronger when she was relaxed and happy. It did not matter to him. He learned to read her expressions, the tilt of her head, the movement of her hands. They developed their own language of gestures and looks that spoke louder than words ever could. In the evenings, they would sit together on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains. Catherine would put his arm around Zara, and she would lean into him, perfectly content. Sometimes she would whisper stories from her childhood, happy memories that she was finally able to revisit without pain. Other times they would sit in comfortable silence, needing no words to communicate their love. Winter came, blanketing the ranch in snow. Catherine and Zara spent long evenings by the fire, reading aloud to each other, planning for the spring planting. They celebrated Christmas with a small tree that Catherine cut from the foothills and Zara decorated with ornaments made from pine cones and dried flowers. It was simple, but perfect. One night in January, as they lay in bed with the wind howling outside, Zara pressed close to Catherine and whispered, "I have news." He turned to her, concerned by the serious tone. "What is it?" "I am with child," she whispered, and even in the darkness he could hear the smile in her voice. Catherine felt as if his heart might burst. "Truly, truly. By summer you will be a father." He gathered her into his arms, holding her tight. "I love you," he said. "I love you so much, Zara. You have given me everything." "You gave me everything first," she whispered back. "You gave me life and hope and love. This child is the proof of that love." The winter seemed longer than usual as Catherine fretted over Zara's health. He wanted to wrap her in cotton and keep her safe, but she laughed at his concern and continued working as she always had, though he insisted she rest more often. Her belly grew round with their child, and Catherine found himself constantly amazed by the miracle of it. Spring arrived with a rush of green growth and new life. The calves were born healthy, and the garden burst forth with seedlings under Zara's careful tending. As summer approached, Catherine grew more anxious. Sheridan had no doctor, only a midwife named Mrs. Garrett, who tended to births in the area. Catherine rode to town and arranged for her to come when Zara's time grew near. In late July, on a hot afternoon that shimmered with heat, Zara's labor began. Catherine sent for Mrs. Garrett, then paced the porch like a caged animal while the midwife attended his wife. He could hear Zara's muffled sounds through the window, not screams but soft cries that tore at his heart. Hours passed, the sun setting and darkness falling before Mrs. Garrett finally emerged. "You have a son," she announced with a tired smile. "A healthy boy with a good set of lungs. Your wife is tired but well." Catherine rushed inside to find Zara propped up in bed, pale and exhausted but smiling. In her arms she cradled a tiny bundle. Catherine approached slowly, almost afraid to breathe. "Meet your son," Zara whispered. Catherine looked down at the baby and felt his world shift. The infant had a shock of dark hair and was crying lustily, his face scrunched up in indignation. Catherine reached out a tentative finger and the baby's tiny hand grasped it with surprising strength. "He is perfect," Catherine whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "You are perfect. Thank you, Zara. Thank you for this gift." "What should we name him?" Zara asked. They had discussed names but never settled on one. Looking at his son, Catherine thought of his father, the man who had taught him to be honest and kind and strong. "Thomas," he said. "Thomas Vale, after your reverend who married us and my father's middle name." "Thomas," Zara repeated softly, looking down at their son. "I like it. Hello, Thomas. Welcome to the world, little one." Mrs. Garrett stayed for 3 days, making sure both mother and baby were healthy before returning to town. Catherine threw himself into caring for Zara and Thomas, bringing meals, changing the baby's cloths, walking the floor when Thomas cried in the night. Zara watched him with love in her eyes, telling him he was a natural father. As Thomas grew, the ranch seemed to come even more alive. His laughter, his cries, his baby babbles filled the house with joy. Catherine would carry him in a sling while doing chores, talking to his son constantly about the cattle, the land, the sky. Zara would sit in the garden with Thomas on a blanket beside her, singing to him in her whispery voice, songs her mother had once sung to her. The years flowed past like water in the creek. Thomas grew from a baby into a toddler, then a sturdy boy who followed his father everywhere, eager to help with the ranch work. When Thomas was 3, Zara gave birth to a daughter they named Grace, after Catherine's mother. Grace had her mother's gray eyes and quiet demeanor, but unlike Zara, her voice was strong and clear from the start. 2 years later came another son, whom they named James. He was the wildest of the children, always getting into mischief, and Catherine often found himself chasing the boy away from the cattle or out of the creek. But James's infectious laugh and boundless energy brought lightness to even the hardest days. Catherine and Zara's love deepened with each passing year. They had their challenges, of course. There were harsh winters when they worried about the livestock, dry summers when the creek ran low, illnesses that scared them until the children recovered. But they faced everything together, their partnership growing stronger through each trial. The ranch prospered under their joint efforts. Catherine's reputation for honest dealing and quality cattle spread, and he found himself in demand. Zara's garden grew into a small farm, and she sold produce in town, her earnings helping to expand the house as their family grew. They added rooms, a larger porch, a proper barn with a loft where the children loved to play. On quiet evenings, when the children were finally asleep, Catherine and Zara would sit together as they had on that first night, watching the sun paint the sky. Sometimes, Zara would whisper about her family, her memories no longer bringing only pain but a bittersweet joy in the remembering. She told the children about their grandparents and aunt and uncles who had died on the trail, making sure those lost souls were not forgotten. "Do you ever regret it?" Catherine asked her one evening when they had been married nearly 8 years. "That day in Sheridan when I brought you here. Do you ever wish things had gone differently?" Zara turned to him, her gray eyes reflecting the sunset. "Never," she whispered firmly. "That day was the worst and the best of my life. The worst because it represented everything I had lost, the best because it brought me to you. You saved me, Catherine, in every way a person can be saved. You gave me love, family, purpose, joy. I would not change a single moment." "I love you," Catherine said, as he had said 1,000 times over the years, but the words never lost their meaning. "I love you too," she whispered back. Always and forever. Thomas, at 10 years old, showed signs of becoming the same kind of man his father was, steady and kind and hardworking. Grace, at 7, had her mother's gift with growing things and spent hours in the garden. James, at 5, was still a whirlwind of energy, but Catherine could already see the intelligence and curiosity that would serve him well. Catherine often thought back to that day in Sheridan, standing in the crowd, watching a woman on an auction block. He had acted on instinct, on moral outrage, on something he could not fully explain. He had not known then that he was rescuing his future wife, the mother of his children, the love of his life. He had simply known he could not stand by and do nothing. That single decision had changed everything. It had taken a lonely rancher and a traumatized woman, and brought them together in a love story that defied the cruelty of their first meeting. It proved that even in the harsh reality of the Wild West, where violence and injustice often ruled, kindness could triumph. Love could bloom in the most unlikely places. Hope could be found even after devastating loss. One autumn afternoon, when the leaves on the cottonwoods had turned gold and the air carried the first hint of winter's chill, Catherine and Zara stood together on a hill overlooking their ranch. The house sat solid and welcoming in the valley below, smoke curling from the chimney. They could see Thomas helping his younger siblings with the chickens, hear their distant laughter carried on the wind. "Look at what we built," Catherine said, his arm around Zara's waist. "Look at what we built together," she corrected gently. "This is ours, every bit of it, our home, our family, our life." "I still think about that day sometimes," Catherine admitted. "What if I had not gone to town? What if I had not stopped at the auction? What if someone else had bid higher?" "But you did go to town," Zara whispered. "You did stop. You did save me. There is no point wondering about what might have been when what is real is so beautiful." She was right, as she so often was. Catherine pulled her closer, breathing in the familiar scent of her, feeling the solid reality of her in his arms. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me," he said. "And you to me," she whispered. They stood there as the sun began to set, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and built a love that would last a lifetime. Below them, their children played, secure in the knowledge that they were loved and safe. Behind them stood the land they had worked together, the ranch that represented their shared dreams and efforts. As darkness fell, they walked hand in hand back down the hill toward the welcoming lights of their home. The door opened before they reached it, Thomas having spotted them returning. Their children spilled out onto the porch, calling for them, eager to show them something or tell them some important news. Zara smiled up at Catherine, her gray eyes full of love and contentment, and he felt his heart swell with gratitude. This was his life now. Not the solitary existence he had once led, but something richer and fuller than he could have imagined. Every day brought new challenges and new joys, and he met them all with Zara by his side. The woman who could only whisper had given him everything he had never known he needed. The gentle rancher had listened closely, and in doing so had heard the song of his own heart. Years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their children. Thomas, at 18, was preparing to take over more of the ranch responsibilities, showing the same steady competence his father possessed. He had met a girl in town, a blacksmith's daughter named Sarah, and Catherine recognized the look in his son's eyes because it mirrored what he had felt all those years ago when he first brought Zara home. Grace, at 15, was already skilled enough with plants and medicine that people from neighboring ranches sometimes came seeking her advice on ailments. She had inherited her mother's quiet strength and gentle nature. James, now 13, had channeled his wild energy into working with horses, showing a gift for training and breeding that had Catherine thinking about expanding into horse ranching alongside the cattle. Catherine himself was 43 now, with silver beginning to thread through his dark hair. Zara was 41, still beautiful in his eyes, her hair also touched with silver but her gray eyes as clear and bright as ever. The years had been kind to them, their love growing deeper and more comfortable without losing any of its passion or devotion. They had weathered storms together, both literal and figurative. A drought 3 years back had tested them, forcing hard decisions about the herd. A bitter winter when James was 9 had nearly killed him with fever, and Catherine had never prayed so hard in his life as he did during those long, terrifying nights. But they had survived everything, emerging stronger each time. The ranch had grown to over 500 acres now, with a substantial herd and a growing reputation. Catherine had bought the neighboring property when old Mr. Henderson, no relation to the man who had auctioned Zara, decided to retire and move back east. They employed 3 ranch hands now, good men who Catherine trusted and treated fairly. Zara still kept her garden, though she had help from Grace, and sold enough produce and preserves that her earnings had paid for the new barn. The town of Sheridan had grown as well, becoming more civilized with proper law enforcement and a real doctor in addition to the midwife. The saloon where girls once worked with bruises had been shut down years ago after the doctor reported the owner for abuse. Progress was slow, but it was happening. One evening in late spring, Catherine and Zara sat on their porch watching another sunset, as had become their tradition. Thomas was in town courting Sarah, while Grace and James were inside doing their studies by lamplight. "Do you remember what I told you all those years ago?" Catherine asked. "When I first brought you here, I said you were free to leave whenever you wanted." "I remember," Zara whispered. "I want you to know that is still true," Catherine continued. "Every day, every moment, you are here by choice. I never want you to feel trapped or obligated." Zara turned to him with a look of such love that it took his breath away even after all these years. "Oh, my darling man," she whispered. "After everything we have been through, all the years and children and struggles and triumphs, do you really think I would choose to be anywhere but here with you?" "I just want you to know," Catherine said. "I want you to never forget that what you give me, you give freely." "I do give it freely," she whispered. "My love, my life, everything I am, I give to you because there is no one else I would rather give it to. You are my heart, Catherine Vale. You have been since the day you climbed those stairs and spoke to me with kindness when I thought kindness had died in the world." He pulled her close, and they sat together as the stars began to appear overhead, countless points of light in the vast Wyoming sky. An owl hooted somewhere in the distance, and the cattle lowed softly in their pastures. These were the sounds of home, of peace, of a life well lived. "Tell me a story," Catherine said, as he sometimes did on evenings like this. "What kind of story?" Zara whispered. "Our story," he said. "From your perspective. I want to hear how you remember it." So Zara whispered their tale, her soft voice painting pictures of that terrible day when she stood on the auction block, certain her life was over. She described seeing him in the crowd, a tall man with kind eyes who looked at her as if she were a person, not property. She told of her fear when he bought her, wondering what horrors awaited, and her shock when he offered her freedom instead of servitude. "I thought I must have died," she whispered, "and you were an angel sent to escort me to heaven. Nothing else made sense. No man was that good, that kind, especially not to someone like me who had nothing to offer." "You had everything to offer," Catherine protested. "I know that now," she said. "But then, I felt worthless. You made me feel valuable again. You gave me time to heal, space to grieve, and slowly, without even trying, you gave me reasons to live. I started to look forward to mornings because I would see you. I started to smile again because of something silly you said. I started to dream of a future because you made me believe I could have one." "When did you know you loved me?" Catherine asked. Zara was quiet for a moment, thinking. "There was not one moment," she finally whispered. "It was 1,000 small moments. The way you always leaned close to hear me instead of asking me to speak up. How you never made me feel broken or less than because of my voice. The gentleness in your hands when you worked with the animals. Your patience when I woke screaming from nightmares. Your smile when I learned to make your favorite meal. It was all of those things and more, building and building until one day I realized my heart had chosen you completely. I knew the moment I saw you cry when I told you that you were free," Catherine said. "I knew I would do anything to keep you safe, to make you happy. It was not love yet, but it was the beginning of it. The love grew as I learned who you were, not just the woman I saved, but Zara, the woman who was strong enough to survive horror and brave enough to love again. The woman who made my house a home and my life complete." They sat in silence for a while, remembering. The door opened behind them and Grace poked her head out. "Mama, Papa, James is being impossible about his arithmetic again. Can you help?" Zara stood, pressing a kiss to the top of Catherine's head before going inside. Catherine sat alone for a few more minutes, looking out at the land he had worked so hard to build. None of it would have meant anything without Zara to share it with. The richest, most successful ranch in Wyoming would have been worthless compared to what he had now. A family, love, a partner to face life with. He thought of the $200 he had spent that day, how he had thought he was sacrificing his plans to expand the herd. Instead, he had made the best investment of his life. That money had bought him nothing, since he had immediately given Zara her freedom, but it had given him the chance to meet her, to win her love honestly rather than through ownership or obligation. Thomas returned from town late that night, his face glowing with happiness. "Papa, I asked Sarah to marry me, and she said yes. We want to wed in the fall after the harvest." Catherine embraced his son, feeling pride and a touch of sadness that his firstborn was becoming a man. "I am happy for you, son. Sarah is a fine woman." "I want to build her a house," Thomas said. "On the eastern section near the creek. We could run our own small herd there, still part of the ranch but giving us space to build our own life." "That sounds like an excellent plan," Catherine said. "Your mother and I will help however we can." Zara appeared in the doorway, having heard the news. She hugged Thomas tightly, whispering her congratulations and joy. Watching them, Catherine felt a sense of completion. His son had found love just as he had. The cycle continued. The summer was busy with preparations for the wedding and building Thomas and Sarah's new house. Catherine worked alongside his son, teaching him the same skills his father had taught him. Grace helped Zara with the wedding preparations, sewing the bride's dress and planning the celebration. James, not to be left out, appointed himself in charge of making sure the new house had a proper barn for Thomas's horses. The wedding took place on a golden September day, with half of Sheridan in attendance. Sarah was a lovely bride, her face radiant with happiness. Thomas stood tall and proud, speaking his vows in a clear, strong voice. Catherine glanced at Zara during the ceremony and saw tears streaming down her face, happy tears for their son's joy. The celebration lasted long into the night, with music and dancing and more food than Catherine thought possible. He danced with Zara, holding her close as they moved to a slow waltz. "We are getting old," he murmured in her ear. "Parents of a married son." "We are not old," Zara whispered back. "We are well loved. That keeps us young." As the party wound down and guests began to depart, Catherine and Zara stood with Grace and James, watching Thomas ride off with his new bride toward their new home. It was bittersweet, this letting go, but it was also right and good. "Will I get married someday?" Grace asked, leaning against her mother. "If you want to," Zara whispered, "but only when you find someone who sees you for who you truly are and loves you for it." "Like Papa loves you," Grace said. "Exactly like that," Zara confirmed. James made a face. "I am never getting married. I just want horses." Catherine laughed and ruffled his son's hair. "You say that now. Wait until you meet the right girl." The years continued their steady march. Grace did eventually marry at 20 to the doctor's son who shared her interest in healing. They remained in Sheridan, where Grace helped her husband with his medical practice, particularly with matters involving women and children. James, true to his word, remained unmarried but became one of the finest horse trainers in Wyoming, his reputation drawing buyers from as far as California. Thomas and Sarah had 4 children of their own, and Catherine found grandparenthood to be a special joy. The grandchildren adored him and Zara, spending hours listening to stories of the old days, when Sheridan was barely more than a rough mining camp, and the ranch was just a dream. Catherine and Zara grew older together gracefully. His hair went fully white, and his movements became slower, but his mind stayed sharp and his love for Zara never dimmed. Her whisper grew quieter with age, so that only he could hear her now, but it did not matter. They had developed such deep understanding that often no words were needed at all. On Catherine's 60th birthday, his children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Thomas gave a speech, talking about the man his father was, the values he had instilled, the love he had shown. "My father taught me that real strength is being kind when you have the power to be cruel," Thomas said. "He showed me that love is a choice you make every day, not just a feeling that comes and goes." He proved that one person can make a difference in another's life, that sometimes all it takes is listening closely when everyone else has stopped paying attention. Catherine felt his throat tighten with emotion. He looked at Zara, who sat beside him with tears on her cheeks. Their children, their grandchildren, the ranch, the life they had built, all of it stemmed from one moment of decision on a dusty street in Sheridan. One choice to do the right thing, to speak up when silence would have been easier. "I would not be the man I am without your mother," Catherine said when it was his turn to speak. "She is the true hero of our story. She survived what would have destroyed most people. She found the courage to love again after losing everything. She built a home and a family from ashes and pain. Everything good in my life comes from her." Zara shook her head, whispering too quietly for anyone but Catherine to hear. "We built it together. Neither of us could have done it alone. That is what love is, 2 people choosing each other every day, building something bigger than themselves." That night, after everyone had left or gone to bed in various rooms throughout the house, Catherine and Zara lay together in their bedroom, the same room they had shared for over 30 years. The moon shone through the window, casting silver light across the floor. "Are you happy?" Catherine asked, as he had asked so many times over the years. "I am happy," Zara whispered. "So happy I sometimes wonder if I am dreaming and will wake up to find none of this is real." "It is real," Catherine assured her, pulling her close. "We are real. Our love is real. Everything we built together is solid and true." "I know," she whispered. "I just cannot believe how blessed I have been. That day, standing on that auction block, I thought my life was over. I had lost everything, everyone I loved. I thought there was nothing left but pain and suffering. And then you appeared, like something from a story, and gave me a reason to hope again." "You gave me purpose," Catherine said. "Before you, I was just existing, going through the motions of life without really living. You taught me what it meant to truly love someone, to put another person's happiness above your own, to build something meaningful." They drifted off to sleep in each other's arms, as they had done countless times, two souls so intertwined that neither could imagine existence without the other. The seasons turned, bringing another spring to the ranch. Catherine was 65 now, still active but slowing down, letting Thomas handle more of the heavy work. Zara was 63, her hair completely white but her gray eyes still bright and alert. They spent more time simply sitting together, enjoying the peace they had earned through decades of hard work and unwavering devotion. One April evening, they sat on their porch watching yet another sunset, a ritual they had maintained through all the years of their marriage. The land was green with new growth, and the cattle grazed peacefully in the distance. Birds sang their evening songs, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of Zara's flowers. "You remember what you asked me once," Zara whispered. "You wanted to know if I ever regretted that day in Sheridan." "I remember," Catherine said. "I want to ask you the same question now," she continued. "Do you regret it? Spending all that money on a woman you did not know, bringing her into your life, taking on all the complications that came with me." Catherine turned to her, taking her lined hand in his. "Zara, spending that $200 was the smartest thing I ever did. It was not spending money, it was an investment that paid dividends beyond measure. Every morning I woke up next to you. Every meal we shared, every challenge we faced together, every child we raised, every sunset we watched, all of it was worth 1,000 times what I paid. You were never a complication. You were the solution to a loneliness I did not even know I had. You were the answer to prayers I had not yet learned to pray." Tears spilled down her cheeks, and she leaned her head on his shoulder. "I love you, Catherine Vale. I have loved you for 37 years, and I will love you for however much time we have left, and beyond that into whatever comes next." "I love you too, Zara Vale," he said, kissing the top of her head. "You are my heart, my home, my everything." They sat together as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink and purple. The stars began to appear, one by one, until the whole vast expanse of sky glittered above them. It was the same sky that had watched over them since that first night when Catherine brought Zara home, the same land that had witnessed their love story unfold. From their house came the sounds of life. Thomas and Sarah had come for dinner with their youngest children, and the sounds of laughter and conversation drifted out. Grace had stopped by earlier with preserves she had made, and James was expected later in the week with a new colt he wanted his father's opinion on. The ranch hummed with activity and love, a living testament to what Catherine and Zara had built. "We did good, did we not?" Catherine said softly. "We did very good," Zara whispered. And in that moment, sitting on the porch of the home they had made together, surrounded by the evidence of their love and life's work, with the stars above and the solid earth beneath, Catherine Vale and Zara Vale knew a peace and contentment that few people ever find. Their story, which had begun with an auction and a rancher who listened closely, had become a legend of love in Sheridan, proof that even in the harsh reality of the Wild West, kindness could triumph, love could bloom, and two people who found each other against all odds could build something beautiful that would last long after they were gone. Their love story would be passed down through generations of their family, an inspiration and a reminder that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with a single choice to do what is right, to listen when others ignore, to love when others would take advantage. Catherine and Zara had shown that true strength lies in gentleness, that real power comes from lifting others up, and that the greatest wealth is not measured in land or cattle but in love shared and lives touched. As the evening deepened into night, they finally stood and went inside, hand in hand, ready to face whatever tomorrow would bring together as they always had been and always would be.